Also on the show, our very own Bob Carruthers will be telling us a little bit more about some of the British tanks in the collection behind me. And if you do like tanks, a bit like me, you can always come down here to Tiger Day, but we don't just have one event here at the Bovington Tank Museum. No, because there's also Tank Fest, which is the 28th and 29th of June, and we'll be talking to Ros Skellen later on about that. So as you can see, it's a bit of a packed edition. We got lots for you today. On with the show.
So what we had was, in order to combat the Tiger legend that very quickly grew up on the battlefield, was the introduction of the machine you've got behind me. This is the Sherman Firefly, and the Allied solution was simply to take the existing chassis of the Sherman and upgun it by adding this 17-pounder, the 76.2mm main gun in the turret here. And this vehicle was capable of taking on the Tiger, and there are instances of the Sherman Firefly destroying Tigers in the field. The big disadvantage for this vehicle, of course, is that the armour wasn't nearly as thick, and it was a very dangerous machine in many respects for the crew because it was prone to catching fire when it was hit. But the Firefly was able to stand toe-to-toe with the Tiger. Here we have the Cromwell tank. This is probably the best of the British tank designs of the Second World War. It had a 5-man crew, which is very important. It had a good main armament, the equivalent of a 75mm gun, and it had a reasonable top speed. It had a very reliable Rolls-Royce engine. And this is the tank that the Desert Rats, the 7th Armoured Division, were equipped with after they left the desert. It was really, particularly came into its own after the breakout from Normandy. And this is the machine which represented the end of effective British tank design during World War II. There were other tanks in the pipeline, but they didn't see service in time. We have the Christie suspension, which is now becoming standard for this type of machine. It has a good hull machine gun, a coaxial machine gun up in the turret, and it has the classic fighting tank arrangement. You've got a commander, a gunner, a loader, a driver, and a radio operator come machine gun. So this could go into action. Everybody had their job to do. It could make decisions in a split second. It could react to situations, and that was very important. So for that reason, this is probably the finest British tank design to see action in reasonable numbers during World War II.
Now, about 1,300 Tiger tanks were actually built, but in 1944 they were replaced with the King Tiger, which is the enormous beast you can see behind me here. And in a moment we're going to have a chat with a chap who's going to tell us a bit more about it.
The Tiger wasn't the end of the design process that the Germans had in operation during the Second World War. Behind me we have the Tiger II, otherwise known as the King Tiger. And you can see from the massive scale of this machine, the amount of resource that would go into producing one of these vehicles was disproportionate to the result. Only 400 were actually manufactured. This one has the Porsche turret, and this was the machine which was being rushed into production to take an even bigger and more powerful main gun. So the Tiger II had enormously wide tracks, as you can see, which spread the weight, so it meant it could travel across fairly soft ground. But this was really this was a design blind alley. The tank was becoming too heavy for its engine and for its suspension. It was also impossible to navigate bridges, for example, because in the narrow roads, for example, in the Ardennes, this machine was simply too heavy to deal with the medieval infrastructure. The gun was also enormously large, so it was difficult to turn corners. So there was a great deal of preparation that had to go into even getting this machine to the battlefield. However, it was very imposing. It was enormously well armoured, and of course it was well armed as well with this high-powered, high-velocity main gun which could destroy any tank on the battlefield at very long ranges, matched of course by wonderfully engineered sights. This thing was not a tank you would like to come up against if you were an Allied crew. Mercifully, there was only enough resources to produce some 470, I think, were put into production. They didn't all reach the battlefield because many were destroyed en route. It was vulnerable, of course, to Allied air interdiction because it's so large. It's not a machine that you could conceal.
Now, the footage of the Jagdtiger surrendering to the American troops at Iserlohn is one of our most requested pieces of footage. And behind me, you can see we actually have a Jagdtiger here. And it gives you a rather good idea of the scale, because I'm only 5'6". And if you look at the size of the beast behind me, it's enormous. And later on, we're going to have an expert from the Tank Museum here who's going to tell us a little bit more about it.
Here is the Jagdtiger assault gun, basically a tank destroyer. And what it was designed to do was take on the Western Allied tanks and the Soviet forces on the Eastern Front at long ranges, about 3,000 to 3,500 metres. The idea was to take an existing chassis, which is in this case the Tiger II chassis, and extend it by 410 millimetres. The reason for that was to fit that 12.8 centimetre gun in it. That's the 12.8 centimetre flat gun, and basically they've put that into onto a chassis to allow it to be propelled around the battlefield. So that was the idea, that, and Hitler in a way had become fixated with very large calibre weapon systems. So this idea was you could be able to have this in special units and be able to knock out these Allied tanks at long ranges. So essentially the whole of the basis of this vehicle is to support this gun. By February of 1944, you've got two vehicles that have been produced and the name Jagdtiger has been decided on. And then on 20th of April 1944, on Hitler's birthday, Hitler comes down to see a demonstration of this vehicle, and he's pretty pleased with it and sees this as a sort of another move to these very heavy and very capable tanks.
Right, now of course behind me you can see, and I'm sorry, I'm a bit excited, we've got Tiger 131, which is of course the reason we're here. And you'll be able to see this fearsome machine driving around in the field a bit later on. And if you're wondering why it is, there's hundreds of people clambering all over it, well, we have the VIP group who are here today, and of course that's another reason to get yourself a VIP ticket, because look at them, you can get to clamber all over a Tiger tank. Right then, Ian, I understand you've just been on this Tiger, is that correct?
Yeah.
So go on then, I think we all want to know, what's it like inside there?
It's amazing to see. It's amazing to stand on it and look out across the turret and the gun, sort of iconic vehicle like that, and then look inside. I wouldn't have wanted to be inside one, to be honest, if someone was shooting at me.
Oh, absolutely, I quite agree. But are you looking forward to later on as well, seeing it rolling around?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, it's fantastic.
So Andrew, what are you doing here at Tiger's Day then?
To see a tiger. I've always been interested. I come from London, so Imperial War Museum is where I've been, and this is a much better step up. I mean, this is a real McCoy. Got the opportunity to get on it, see it run. It's the ultimate, you know.
Have you been on it yet?
Not yet. Right. No, I'm going to go on it in a few minutes.
Oh well, I don't want to keep you too long, but you're looking forward to it?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that about wraps it up for part 2. Come and join us again in part 3, where we're going to be showing you even more of Tiger 131.